During my difficult labor with massive hemorrhage, the doctor asked Evan whether to save the adult or the child. Evan leisurely uttered 2 words, "Save the child." The man's indifferent voice echoed in my ear, "This is what you owe Celine." In the end, both the child and I died on the operating table, one corpse with 2 lives. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day when Evan's white moonlight went to the hospital for an abortion. I called Evan, "Celine is about to abort the child, come to the hospital quickly." In this reborn life, we owe each other nothing. I choose to fulfill their wishes, hoping they last forever. Here is 1 million, abort the child, and stop entangled with my son. The familiar voice made me realize that I had been reborn. In the cafe, a graceful and luxurious middle-aged lady sat on the same side as me. Opposite was a woman wearing a white cotton long dress, with no makeup on her face, and a slightly protruding lower abdomen. She hung her head, her hand holding the coffee cup trembling slightly. This was Celine, Evan's white moonlight. In my previous life, she was abandoned by a scumbag, became pregnant, and begged Evan to marry her to give the child in her belly an identity. After thinking overnight, Evan chose to break off the engagement with me and register marriage with Celine. Although we hadn't registered yet, the wedding news had already spread. Breaking off at this time would inevitably cause my family to lose face and become a joke in the circle. So Grace assured, "Don't worry, your wedding will proceed as scheduled." 1 million aborted Celine's child and also severed the possibility of her registering marriage with Evan. But I could never forget the moment Evan learned that Celine's child was gone. His eyes were bloodshot. He grabbed my neck and angrily said, "One day, I will make you pay with your life." The intense pain below, the bed full of blood, Evan's cold words saved the child, that bone-eroding heartache, even after rebirth, still left me with lingering fear. "Lynn, let's go home." Grace's gentle voice snapped me back to reality. She patted my hand, "It's all settled, that woman took the money and is going to the hospital for the abortion now. Don't worry, no one can separate you and Evan." Grace pulled me out of the cafe, while Celine just hailed a taxi, bent over with her pregnant belly to get in. I found an excuse to bid farewell to Grace, then also took a taxi to the hospital. In this life, I won't let Celine abort the child, and I no longer owe her anything. In the car, I dialed Evan. "Celine is about to abort the child, come to the hospital quickly." In the hospital, it was Celine's turn. Celine walked slowly toward the operating room, looking back every 3 steps. I stood at the corner of the corridor, able to see everything happening in front of the operating room door. I knew she was waiting for Evan. In the previous life, before entering the operating room, she sent a message to Evan but didn't wait for him. Because Grace had tampered with Evan's phone, blacklisting Celine's number. When he learned the news from Celine's best friend and rushed to the hospital, Celine had already finished the surgery and was lying on the bed. Celine cried to Evan that the child was gone because someone couldn't tolerate her and the child. Plus, Celine's number was blacklisted. Evan naturally associated it with me, imposing many crimes on me. In this life, I took the initiative to call Evan. He finally arrived before Celine entered the operating room. Celine threw herself into his arms, crying like a tearful person, "Evan, someone wants me to abort the child and not entangle you." The woman in his arms cried pitifully, but Evan stiffened his body and said nothing. This time, he had no reason to doubt me. Because I took the initiative to call and notify him. Seeing Evan's lack of reaction, Celine simply made it clear, it was Lynn, she gave me 1 million to abort the child and not allow us to register marriage. What a vicious heart she has. We clearly agreed that for the child's identity, we were just fake marrying. Why would she harm an innocent little life? Evan lowered his eyes without speaking, just holding the person tighter. I took a deep breath, turned and left. Celine's child was preserved, and Evan could fulfill his wish to register marriage with her. Evan ignored his family's opposition and was determined to register marriage with Celine. I heard he was punished to kneel for a day and a night, and even severely beaten by Edward. But it still couldn't change his determination. Edward and Grace came to my house to apologize. "It's our fault for not teaching our son properly, making Lynn suffer." My mom held Grace's hand. Matters of affection can't be forced, we can only say the children don't have this fate. My marriage with Evan was a childhood betrothal arranged by the two family elders when they were young. Because Grandpa Richard was critically ill, our marriage was put on the agenda. After Edward and Grace left, my mom comforted me. It's okay, our Lynn is so excellent, she will always find someone who truly loves her. In a daze, I thought of my previous life when my mom said the same words. At that time Evan and I were already married. A few months after our marriage, Grandpa Richard passed away. During that time I was very painful. Evan, because of Celine's abortion, had always been extremely cold to me. The long-term cold violence led me to severe depression. When she discovered I was taking antidepressants, my mom cried. She said, "Lynn, divorce. If this marriage can't bring you happiness, only pain remains, there's no need to continue. Our Lynn is so excellent, she will always find someone who truly loves her." Under my mom's persuasion, I also considered divorce, but Evan suddenly changed like a different person. He cared for me attentively, asking about my well-being, as if the previous coldness and rebukes were my illusions. That period was too sweet enough to make me forget Celine, thinking Evan truly loved me. Later, I learned that it was just arsenic wrapped in honey, immersing me in it, and finally delivering a fatal blow. I saw Celine again in the wedding dress shop. The clerk notified me that my reserved wedding dress had arrived. The words "I don't need it anymore" reached my mouth but were swallowed back. In the previous life, Evan blamed Celine's abortion on me. Before the wedding, we were in a cold war. My mood was terrible, so much so that I never wore the reserved beautiful wedding dress even once. The two of us went directly to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get the marriage certificate. It could be considered fulfilling Grandpa Richard's last wish before his death. This time, I wanted to wear a beautiful wedding dress, not for a man, but to please myself. When I arrived at the wedding dress shop, I heard a familiar female voice. "Evan, this wedding dress is so beautiful, I want to try this one." Lifting my eyes, I saw Celine pointing at the pure white lace wedding dress on the mannequin. It was exactly the one I reserved. I sneered and curled my lip. Celine really wanted to rob everything from me. Evan's low voice sounded, "Please take down the wedding dress for my wife to try." Before the clerk could answer, I stepped first to the mannequin. "This wedding dress is custom-made, I'm afraid your wife can't wear it." After saying that, I deliberately glanced at Celine's protruding abdomen. Celine and Evan obviously didn't expect me to appear here. After being stunned for a few seconds, Celine's eyes quickly reddened. "Lynn, don't misunderstand, I'm not robbing you. I've just never worn a wedding dress, so I asked Evan to help fulfill this wish. Rest assured, we won't hold a wedding." In the previous life, Celine also never wore a wedding dress. After the child was aborted, she left the capital city and later married an alcoholic. I heard that after a few years, she died from domestic violence and abuse by the alcoholic. Her wish had nothing to do with me, as long as she didn't rob my wedding dress. I called the clerk to take down the wedding dress for me to try. Suddenly, a hand with distinct knuckles gripped my wrist. Evan looked at me with deep eyes. "What are you trying on a wedding dress for? You're not getting married." His scrutinizing gaze made me feel ridiculous. I shook off his hand. "Who said I'm not getting married?" Evan's face showed anger. With a sullen face, he dragged me out of the wedding dress shop. "Let me go, Evan." He used great force, making my hand hurt badly. Outside the wedding dress shop, he still held me tightly. My wrist was strangled with a circle of red marks. "Lynn, stop making trouble, okay?" Evan frowned tightly. "I've said it many times, as long as Celine gives birth to the child and registers the household, I'll divorce her, and then we'll get married. You can't even wait a few months, one moment making Celine abort the child, the next robbing her wedding dress." His gaze toward me was full of disappointment. "Lynn, how did I not discover before that your jealousy is so strong?" My chest hurt badly. Whether in the previous life or this one, in Evan's eyes, I was a jealous and vicious woman. He never liked me, only had disgust and hatred for me. But clearly in childhood, when I was bullied, he would protect me behind him, gently saying, "Lynn, don't be afraid, brother will protect you for a lifetime." That Evan brother who promised to protect and care for me could never be found again. Seeing me lower my eyes in silence, Evan softened his tone. "Okay, let the wedding dress go to Celine, adjust the size and she can wear it. When we get married, I'll order you a more beautiful wedding dress, okay?" I looked up at Evan's hypocritical face, feeling only disgust. "No need," I sneered. "Why should my wedding dress be given to her? Besides, we won't get married either." I ignored Evan and turned back into the shop. But the next second, I was nearly collapsing. Celine, ignoring the clerk's obstruction, tore my wedding dress off the mannequin. The flawless wedding dress instantly tore into two halves. On the phone was Evan's transfer message. "Celine didn't do it on purpose, don't argue with her. Take the 2 million first, later I'll take you to order a more expensive and beautiful wedding dress." I didn't accept his money and threw the phone on the table. At that time I was really angry, wishing to tear Celine apart with my hands. But when I glanced at her abdomen, I still forcibly held back. In this life, no matter what, I couldn't let Celine lose the child. I no longer owed them anything, but I also wouldn't allow them to hurt me. I exhaled a breath of turbid air, picked up the phone again, and blacklisted all of Evan's contact methods. At this moment, I just wanted to draw a clear line with them forever. But enemies often cross paths. A week later, I encountered Celine again. In the mall, I brushed past Celine. I originally wanted to pretend not to know her, but someone grabbed my hem. "Lynn, I really didn't tear that wedding dress on purpose, I just liked it too much." Celine's tears were swirling in her eyes again. "Can you forgive me?" Watching her tears skillfully fall, I felt a surge of irritation. "So, as long as it's mine, you have to find ways to rob it?" This sentence successfully stopped Celine's tears. She blinked her moist eyes, her lips slightly curved. "Can't I? Lynn. Why can you have a good family background, an excellent fiancé, while I have nothing? I have too little, so share some with me, okay?" I speechlessly rolled my eyes. She was Evan's white moonlight. Evan had pursued her before, but she looked down on Evan, wanting to climb up to the more noble capital circle's crown prince, Jason. As a result, the crown prince didn't look at her at all. Instead, she was toyed with by other young masters in that circle and finally miserably abandoned. "Now Evan is already yours, please stop entangling me, okay?" I just wanted to get rid of her and leave quickly. Her touch made me feel disgusted. "Lynn, please leave the capital city, okay? My child can't be without a father. As long as you leave, Evan and I can be together forever." I suddenly widened my eyes. What outrageous words she was saying. I had already conceded to this point, yet she was not satisfied, insisting that I leave my hometown to fulfill her wish. "Impossible. After marriage, whether you can keep Evan depends on your ability." I gently pushed her away and lifted my foot to leave. "Ah!" Celine suddenly screamed and fell backward. In a flash, I rushed behind Celine, holding her waist with both hands. But she kept retreating, pressing all her weight toward me. My steps staggered, finally unable to support, both of us fell to the ground. But at the last moment of falling, I still firmly held her waist, letting her fall on me. My back heavily hit the floor, a sharp pain came from my waist, and I couldn't help but hiss lightly. Unexpectedly, Celine cried loudly first. "Lynn, I won't rob Evan from you anymore, please don't hurt the child. Evan, save me." Hearing this, I suddenly looked up, just meeting Evan's sharp gaze. He carefully helped Celine up and pulled her into his arms. Celine buried her face in his chest, crying heartbrokenly, "Evan, I was wrong, we won't get married. I know Lynn is angry at me, but if there's something, come at me, the child is innocent." Evan looked down at me condescendingly, his eyes cold. "Lynn, when did you become so vicious, repeatedly trying to kill Celine's child? That's a living life, aren't you afraid of retribution?" His stern expression reminded me of the previous life. When he learned Celine's child was gone, he looked at me with the same cold gaze. The suffocating feeling of being choked surged up again. I turned away my gaze, breathing deeply hard to suppress the suffocation. Perhaps my ignore made Evan more angry. He kicked my waist side, making me frown in pain. Don't think lying on the ground pretending to be dead will settle this. Get up and apologize. At this time, the surroundings were full of onlookers. Some who witnessed the whole process spoke up for me. This gentleman is too much. How can he treat a girl like this? Moreover, she fell to save that lady. She didn't intend to harm that lady and her child at all. For a moment, whispers arose around. Evan furrowed his brows, his gaze patrolling between me and Celine, seeming to judge who was lying. Ah! Celine cried out, suddenly clutching her belly. Evan, my belly hurts so much. Please save my child, I can't lose him. Evan pursed his lips, glanced at me darkly, and threw down, if something happens to Celine's child, don't delusion that I'll still marry you. After saying that, he hugged Celine and left hastily. I watched the man's departing back and sneered lightly, just what I wanted. A kind person helped me up, but I seemed to have injured my waist, standing unsteadily, almost falling again. At this moment, a pair of slender and strong hands supported me from behind. A casual tone fell from above, so eager to throw yourself into my arms? I looked up and saw a captivating handsome face. The man's eyes carried a bit of playfulness and unruliness. The man's hand supported my waist, and another wave of pain hit. I gritted my teeth. Jason, take me to the hospital. In the hospital, the doctor diagnosed that my lumbar vertebra was damaged and needed bed rest for a week. My mom received the news and immediately rushed to the hospital. Seeing me lying flat on the bed, she was extremely anxious. Lynn, what happened to you? I couldn't turn, only glancing sideways at my mom. Nothing, Mom, just accidentally fell. You child, how so careless? My mom scolded, but when her gaze swept to the man in the ward, she fell silent. Whether in the previous life or this one, Jason always had an outstanding temperament, being the focus of attention wherever he was. He nodded to my mom. Auntie. My mom immediately smiled brightly. AI. Who is he, your new boyfriend? My mom leaned over and whispered in my ear. My face inexplicably felt hot, and I quickly denied. Mom, don't talk nonsense. My mom had a knowing expression. Right, I have some things to do, I'll go first. She hurriedly left the ward and thoughtfully closed the door. My mouth couldn't help twitching. Jason chuckled, walked to the bedside, and lightly laughed. Auntie is quite cute. Looking at Jason's familiar brows and eyes, my eyes instantly moistened. Our acquaintance began with an accident. When Jason was swimming, his leg cramped. I jumped into the water and saved him from nearly drowning. Because of this unexpected life-saving grace, my relationship with Jason grew closer. In the previous life, Evan had warned me to stay away from Jason, saying he wasn't a good person. At that time, I teased him that a big man was so jealous. Later, I learned that Evan was jealous, but not of me, but of Celine. The night before Evan and I registered, Jason came to find me. He said, marrying Evan won't make you happy, come with me. Looking at his extended hand, I was silent for a long time and still turned to leave. In the previous life, I chose the childhood sweetheart feelings with Evan for many years, ending up battered and losing my life. And Jason left the country on the day Evan and I registered and never returned. Unknowingly, tears covered my face. Jason helped wipe my tears, his eyes flashing panic and worry. Does your waist still hurt? I'll call the doctor. I grabbed his hand and pressed it to my face, feeling the warm touch of the man's palm, and shook my head. Jason. I looked at him steadily. Will you marry me? I stayed in the hospital for a week before discharge. On the discharge day, Jason had a company meeting. I didn't let him pick me up. Unexpectedly, I encountered Evan and Celine again. Evan carefully supported Celine into the elevator, protecting her attentively. In the previous life, every prenatal checkup when I was pregnant was alone. Seeing other pregnant women accompanied by husbands, I was envious. The two entered the elevator while talking. I tried to hide in the corner but was still spotted by Evan at a glance. Lynn, you actually followed us to the hospital, what do you want? Celine shrank in Evan's arms. Lynn, please let me and the child go, I'll return Evan to you, okay? Although she said that, her glancing gaze was full of provocation and flaunting. Evan held her tightly. Don't be afraid, with me here, no one can hurt you. He stared at me viciously again. Clearly I did nothing, yet I became the most vicious woman in his eyes. Move aside. I didn't want to talk more with them, past them to exit the elevator. Suddenly, a big hand gripped my wrist. Apologize. Evan gritted his teeth, spitting out these two words, his hand exerting force continuously, as if to crush my wrist bone. I was in so much pain that tears were about to come out. Whether in the previous life or this one, he hurt me thoroughly for Celine. I thought not to cry, but it was too painful. The body hurt, but the heart hurt more. That Evan brother who said he would protect me for a lifetime could never come back. Tears uncontrollably fell. I gritted my teeth and retorted, I did nothing wrong, why apologize to the mistress who robbed my man? Celine heard and cried softly, I'm not a mistress. Evan was furious, released my wrist, raised his hand to slap my face. At this time, his hand was clamped from behind. A cold, low voice came, what are you doing to my fiancé? Evan frowned tightly, staring at the man behind. Jason, what nonsense are you talking? Where is your fiancé? Jason forcefully twisted Evan's hand back, making a crisp crack sound. Evan's face instantly darkened, the pain made him frown, large beads of sweat sliding down his forehead. Jason pulled me into his arms, seeing the red marks on my wrist, his eyes deepened. He rubbed my wrist, casually saying, next time you dare hurt my fiancé even a bit, it won't be as simple as disabling one hand. After saying that, he held me and prepared to leave. Evan used his last strength, gritting his teeth and roaring, Jason, since when do you like picking up trash? Do you know, Lynn is the worn-out shoe I played with. Bang, Jason kicked Evan to the ground, Evan fell on his back. Then a black leather shoe ruthlessly crushed Evan's mouth. Since you can't speak properly, there's no need to keep this mouth. Evan's mouth was blocked by the dust-covered sole, rubbing back and forth. He whimpered, unable to speak. His eyes stared deadly at Jason, the bloodshot eyeballs full of hatred. The nearby Celine was already scared silly, stunned in place. After a while, she came to her senses, slowly knelt on the ground, hugging Jason's leg. Jason, please spare Evan, if there's something, come at me. She cried heartbrokenly, her hands tightly hugging Jason's thigh, making him unable to move. Relying on the child in her belly, she figured Jason wouldn't dare do anything to her. But Jason was not one to be manipulated, his strong family background determined that whatever he did, someone would cover for him. He impatiently pulled his foot, preparing to kick Celine away. I quickly pulled him, shaking my head, no need to dirty your feet for these people. Jason hummed lightly twice and still stopped the action. But Celine, as if without any discernment, held Jason's leg without letting go. This appearance was exactly like her bootlicking when pursuing Jason back then. Celine, if you want to keep the child and still marry Evan, then be sensible and let go. I looked down at her condescendingly, she with her belly, kneeling on the ground teetering, utterly disheveled. After a moment, she unwillingly let go. Worn shoe matches bastard, a natural pair. Jason disdainfully glanced at them, then held me and left. Behind came Celine's suppressed crying and Evan's painful howls. Jason seemed very angry, the hand holding my shoulder slightly exerted force. I glanced at his expression, pursed my lips. I didn't know if he was angry because Evan and Celine bullied me or because of Evan's words. I tugged his sleeve, Jason, I have nothing with Evan, if you mind. He glared at me fiercely, the remaining words choked in my throat, unable to come out. Actually, it's normal for him to mind. Now thinking back, in the previous life, Evan's suspicion of me never dissipated. After I got pregnant, Evan's attitude was very cold, showing no excitement or joy. Besides, because Celine was forced to abort the child, the more important reason was probably that he suspected the child in my belly wasn't his. Even after marriage, I had long cut contact with Jason, but Evan still didn't trust me. Driven by anger and suspicion, Evan ultimately sent me to a dead end. Jason's dark eyes gazed at me deeply. After a long time, he sighed. Lynn, you proposed marriage initiatively, don't you plan to take responsibility for me? What? I didn't react for a bit. The next second, Jason hugged me, pressing my head into his chest. I don't care about your past with Evan, but I hope your future has me. Lynn, this time, can you not leave me behind? Listening to his strong heartbeat, my nose tingled. If in the previous life, I could have seen Evan's true face earlier, could have held Jason's extended hand, perhaps it would have been a different ending. Fortunately, heaven gave me a chance to be reborn. This time, I don't want to miss it again. I leaned in his arms, tightly holding Jason's hand. Jason, let's get married. Learning of my marriage with Jason, my parents were overjoyed. Especially my mom, almost taking a loudspeaker to flaunt at the Gu family's door. I said my daughter is so excellent, she can definitely find better. Evan is blind, treating an indecent woman as treasure, bullying my daughter, now he gets retribution. I heard Evan's hand was almost crippled, after several major surgeries, it was barely preserved. And what happened in the mall that day became a secret rumor in the circle. The mall surveillance didn't capture the scene, onlookers avoided talking about it. Some said Evan offended someone he shouldn't for Celine. Others said Celine was a jinx, Evan insisting on marrying her brought disaster. Opinions varied. But because of this, the Gu family elders were furious, especially Grandpa Richard was so angry he went directly to the ICU. Celine's dream of using the child to marry Evan was completely shattered. Jason and I chose a good day to register. Arriving at the Civil Affairs Bureau, I felt as if separated by a lifetime. In the previous life, the scene of registering with Evan was still vivid. At that time, we had started a Cold War because of Celine. But to fulfill Grandpa Richard's last wish, and because I had a filter from our childhood sweetheart period for Evan. So I chose to step into an unfortunate marriage with him. I still remember the photo on the marriage certificate then, we two were together in appearance but apart in spirit, forcing smiles. This life won't be like that, I want to firmly grasp my own happiness. Jason held my hand, we smiled at each other and stepped into the Civil Affairs Bureau together. But unexpectedly encountered Evan here. Evan's right hand was wrapped in bandages, fixed with a splint hanging on his neck. His hair had grown longer, stubble around his lips, the whole person looking unkempt. As soon as he appeared, he was stopped by security outside. Indeed, his attire and appearance were out of place with the people here. A bit like a patient escaped from a mental hospital. The reason for his appearance here, no need to guess, was for Celine. Unexpectedly, Evan had deep feelings for Celine. Even breaking with family, he wanted to register with Celine. But all this had nothing to do with me. Jason and I passed by him without looking again. Unexpectedly, Evan grabbed my wrist. The cold touch like a venomous snake coiling around, I couldn't help shouting, "Let me go." Jason narrowed his eyes, exuding a killing aura. However, before Jason could act, Evan suddenly knelt on the ground. He looked up at me, his eyes scarlet. "Lynn, give me another chance, okay? I remember everything." The anesthesia made Evan forget the surgical pain. In coma, he dreamed of the previous life. When Celine came to him with a belly, his first reaction was refusal. In youth, one is always attracted by novel people and things. Celine came from a poor family but strived upward, resilient. She was completely different from these rich young masters and misses. He had been attracted to her, had adolescent stirrings. But this stirring was brief. Especially when he discovered Celine was a vain woman, his stirring vanished completely. He saw his true feelings, the one he liked from beginning to end was his childhood sweetheart little sister, Lynn. But another man's appearance was like a thorn in his heart. Jason, a true favored son of heaven, superior appearance, prominent background. All women crazily infatuated with him, revolving around him, including Celine and Lynn. Whenever seeing Lynn and Jason chatting and laughing, he was jealous to madness. Clearly they grew up together, childhood sweethearts, why couldn't he compare to the heaven-sent Jason? Why did Lynn smile so happily at Jason, but face him with only cold faces and arguments? So he wanted to retaliate against Lynn. He deliberately agreed to Celine's request, broke engagement with Lynn, registered with Celine. He just wanted to embarrass Lynn, let Lynn experience his pain. Seeing the painful expression on Lynn's face, he felt indescribable pleasure. Later, Celine's child was aborted. Celine accused Lynn of being vicious, forcing her to abort. He didn't feel much. The child aborted, so be it. Anyway, it wasn't his child. But Celine's casual sentence, "Actually, I'm pregnant with Jason's child. Lynn likes Jason, so she won't let go of my child." Just because of this sentence, it stimulated his nerves. Knowing the circle rumored Jason looked down on Celine, she was impregnated by other young masters' play. But he still blindly believed Celine's words. The word Jason was like his sore spot. Hearing this name made him lose all rationality. So he used the pretext of Celine's child being gone to vent all his anger on Lynn. He married Lynn. He wanted to make her forever unable to be with Jason, wanted to make Lynn suffer unbearably. Until the moment Lynn had difficult labor, he was still thinking of retaliating against Lynn. So he said that heartless save the child. But when learning Lynn and the fetus died on the operating table, Evan was overwhelmed by huge grief. He did retaliate against Lynn, but his pain was no less than Lynn's. After their marriage, Jason completely disappeared, but this thorn was too deep, making Evan unable to let go forever. But when losing the most loved person, he regretted immensely. If there was a next life, he must treat Lynn well, keep the childhood promise, care for her, protect her. But it was still one step late. When he had the previous life's memory, Lynn was already about to marry Jason. "Lynn, I was wrong. I never liked Celine. I married her just to anger you. The one I love has always been you. I was jealous of Jason. Clearly we are the childhood sweethearts, but your eyes only have him. Jealousy made me lose rationality, doing those things to hurt you. Can you give me a chance to make up?" Evan looked up at me, his reddened eyes full of apology and regret. I took a deep breath, finally couldn't hold back and slapped him. "Evan, people like you don't deserve to say love. Loving someone is tolerance, trust, care, not hurt. Using jealousy as pretext to hurt wantonly, you don't love me at all. The one you love most is yourself. In the previous life, I was really blind, leaving Jason unselected, choosing you, this cruel and heartless cold-blooded animal." Evan wasn't angry from being hit, but curled his lip, bringing his face to my hand. "Lynn, as long as you can vent, hit me as many times as you want. Come, hit hard." Evan was completely mad. That crazy appearance startled me. I kept retreating, hiding in Jason's arms. Jason reached out to protect me, forcefully kicking Evan over with his foot. Evan fell disheveled to the ground, suddenly laughing sarcastically. "Lynn, do you think Jason really likes you? In the previous life, after he went abroad, I heard he had many girlfriends outside. Do you think he really can't do without you?" Jason was anxious, eagerly explaining to me, but I interrupted. "In the previous life, I rejected him. Who he dated was his freedom. At least he never did anything to hurt me. More importantly, at the moment before I died, he rushed back. I remember him saying in my ear, 'Lynn, I will avenge all the pain you suffered.'" I turned to look at Jason. "Am I right, Jason?" Jason's eyes flashed a moment of surprise, but immediately understood. "You know everything." I nodded. When he said this time, "Can you not leave me?" I knew he was also reborn. Fortunately, we were reborn in time. Everything was still possible. Evan laughed even louder. "Indeed, everything is karma." His laughter attracted many people coming to register to stop and watch. Not understanding how a madman ran into the Civil Affairs Bureau. When security prepared to drive Evan out, another madwoman rushed in from outside. "Evan, you said you would marry me, did you forget?" Celine, with her belly, rushed over quickly. Not caring about the child in her belly at all. Perhaps in her eyes, the child was just a tool to help her climb up. Celine pounced to Evan's side, tears covering her face. "Evan, let's get married. Okay, let's register today." Evan came to his senses, disgustedly pushed her away. You mad woman, stay away from me. If not for you, I would have married Lynn long ago, it's all your fault, you woman. Saying that, he stood up and walked toward me again. Lynn, let's get married now, like in the previous life. I promise this time I will treat you well. Evan's face carried an obsessed smile, he was completely mad. Jason protected me behind him, about to control Evan. The Celine behind first grabbed Evan's arm. Evan, she doesn't want you, I want you. Let's register today, okay? Evan turned to look at Celine, eyes full of contempt and disgust. Celine, a dirty woman like you wants to marry me, are you worthy? As the words fell, Evan heavily shook her off. Celine screamed, the whole person fell to the ground, soon blood flowed from her thigh, staining the entire ground red. That day, the scene was too chaotic. Jason and I didn't successfully register in the end. When Celine was sent to the hospital, the child wasn't preserved, she became mad. Every day on the street, asking everyone, where is my child, give my child back to me. Later, she was forcibly sent to a mental hospital. Her remaining life would be spent in dark wards. And Evan was sent to prison for intentional injury. I heard not long after entering, Evan conflicted with a prisoner. That was a vicious criminal. When the guards discovered, Evan had been beaten to death by that prisoner. Jason and I reselect a sunny day to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. This time, we smoothly got the marriage certificate. Walking out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, each holding a red booklet. The sunlight on the body was very warm. I smiled at him, Mr. Jason, please advise. Jason curled his lip, Mrs. Lynn, please advise. In this life, we will hold each other's hands and walk firmly together.